Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so today we are diving headfirst into a story of just impossible odds. We're talking sheer courage and ultimate restoration. We're looking at the historical account of Nehemiah and how a completely broken, decimated city was brought back to life, right when literally everyone else had given up.
I want you to just imagine the sheer contrast here. Jerusalem is a city that has lain in scorched, silent ruins for decades. Decades. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away, one of its own people is living a completely safe, comfortable life in the opulent Persian palace at Susa. So what actually happens when a lowly cupbearer attempts to resurrect that ruined city from 1,000 miles away?
You really have to grasp the massive scale of the problem here. On one hand, you've got King Artaxerxes. This guy is the most powerful man in the world, commanding vast armies and just immense wealth. And on the other side, Nehemiah. He's a cupbearer. A trusted servant, sure, but a guy with absolutely no royal title and definitely no army. It's right into this massive power imbalance that Nehemiah gets some truly devastating news from his brother. Jerusalem's walls are broken and its gates have been completely burned to the ground.
So how does he react? Well, before Nehemiah did anything else, before acting, before planning, or rushing off to try and fix it, he just collapsed. He wept openly and he fasted for days. His very first reaction was deep, personal prayer, and he confessed not just his people's historical failures, but his own personal shortcomings too. The rebuilding, you see, didn't start with architectural blueprints. It started right there on his knees.
Fast forward a bit, months pass, and Nehemiah is back at work serving the king. But his grief is just way too heavy to hide. King Artaxerxes notices this and asks, "Why does your face look so sad since you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart." Now, what makes this exact moment so incredibly tense is that showing grief before an ancient Persian king, that could be a literal death sentence. You are expected to be perfectly content in the presence of royalty, no exceptions. So in that utterly terrifying moment, Nehemiah shoots up this silent, desperate prayer. And then he makes a seriously audacious request to the most powerful man in the world. He asks for the absolute impossible. He wants permission to leave his post. He wants royal letters of protection to travel 1,000 miles. And get this, he even asks for the timber needed to physically rebuild the city. And miraculously, the king says yes. After surviving this massive journey across the desert, Nehemiah finally arrives in Jerusalem. But he doesn't just roll in and announce his grand plans right away. Instead, he conducts a secret midnight inspection. He silently surveys the damaged, rubble-strewn perimeter totally alone by moonlight. Why? Because he knows he needs to see exactly what he is asking his exhausted, demoralized people to face before he speaks a single word to them. When dawn breaks, he finally reveals his plan. Standing there before the gathered officials, priests, and nobles of the city, he just lays it all out. "You see the trouble we are in. Let us rebuild the wall, that we may no longer be in disgrace." Hearing that quiet, undeniable conviction and seeing the king's letters of support, this powerful, unified resolve just spreads across their tired faces. They agreed to build.
But, as soon as the work begins, so does the resistance. Not everyone wanted Jerusalem rebuilt. Enemies of the Israelites, guys like Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, they're watching the construction from horseback. And they start with sneering mockery, laughing and asking, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they finish in a day?" But when all that mockery didn't stop the building, well, they started plotting real, armed, and deadly attacks in the shadows.
Sanballat even tried to use deception. He sent 4 different false, friendly-looking invitations by messenger to try and lure Nehemiah away from the city for a supposed meeting. But Nehemiah, he saw right through the trap. His legendary, absolutely uncompromising response shut down every single attempt. He told them, "I am doing a great work and cannot come down." He simply refused to be distracted.
So, how did they handle the very real threat of an armed attack? With this brilliant mix of faith and pure, practical grit. They instituted a duality of work. Half the men hauled stone and built the wall, while the other half stood guard with swords and spears. Trusting that God would fight for them, they literally built the city with one hand while gripping a weapon in the other. Talk about intense.
Yet, incredibly, the biggest threat wasn't even outside the walls. Nehemiah discovers this massive internal crisis. Wealthy Jews within the city were actually exploiting their own poorer neighbors. These gaunt, worn-out families were trapped in crushing debt just to buy basic food. Nehemiah was absolutely furious. He confronted his own wealthy nobles just as firmly as he did his enemies, demanding that all fields and interests be returned immediately. And shamed by his integrity, they actually agreed.
With both the internal and external threats finally managed, the physical stones continued to rise at just an unbelievable pace. Remember, day 1 was that silent midnight inspection. By day 30, they are fighting off rising opposition, working fully armed. Against every external threat, every false invitation, and every internal conflict, the gaps were closed and the massive gates were rehung.
52 days. That is all it took. They finished the entire wall around the city in just 52 days. It was a time frame so completely stunning that the surrounding nations, the very same enemies who had just been mocking them, were visibly shaken. Even they realized that this couldn't have been done by human strength alone. A much greater power was behind it.
But hey, the story doesn't end with bricks and mortar. With the walls finally complete, the people didn't immediately throw a massive party. Instead, this huge crowd gathered together at the city's water gate to listen. Ezra the scribe stepped up onto a raised wooden platform, unrolled the scroll, and read the law of Moses aloud from daybreak all the way to midday. As they listened, the people wept openly, suddenly realizing just how far they had drifted from God's word over those long, difficult decades.
But Nehemiah and the leaders stepped in and completely shifted the atmosphere. Nehemiah told the weeping crowd, "Do not grieve, for the joy of the Lord is your strength." They reminded the people that spiritual conviction wasn't meant to leave them living in ruins. It was meant to lead them to joy. And with that beautiful instruction, their mourning shifted into a massive, joyful feast for the Festival of Booths. What is so fascinating to me is how Nehemiah's physical journey gives us a blueprint for how God often fixes the broken, unfinished projects in our own lives today. It starts with a burden you just can't shake. Then it moves to humble confession on your knees before you take a single step. And finally, it requires uncompromising work and prayer, building with one hand and praying with the other.
But of course, the story doesn't end with a physical wall. That wall in Jerusalem was incredibly important, sure, but it was just a precursor to a much greater, eternal restoration. The ultimate gospel truth, found in Ephesians chapter 2, is that Christ himself is our peace, who has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility.
And the profound difference between these two realities is just so clear. Nehemiah built a temporary, physical wall through immense human effort to protect a scattered people, a wall that, let's remember, eventually fell again. The gospel, however, points to an open gate. It is accomplished entirely by Christ, permanently tearing down the wall of separation between humanity and God. It's a way back that doesn't depend on our frantic human building at all.
So I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought. When the walls of your own life feel like scorched ruins, how will you respond? Will you rely entirely on your own frantic building and striving, or will you rest in the finished work and the ultimate joy of the Lord? Thank you for diving into this amazing historical narrative with me on This Explainer. Keep learning, keep building, and I'll catch you next time.